philosophical practice of several exercises of several sessions of philosophical practice. So we can think, because in every exercise or session, individual session, what is the center? There is obviously the talks and the dialogues. There is also the connection with situations, with feelings, with experience. So all this is very strange, because it's what is in our faculty is in imaginations, because imagination is not fancy. It's no fancy. It's no imagination. Is something more true, more close to the truth. So it's very important for us, I think, to put in the center this the imagination, the philosophical imagination. But I think the imagination is naturally philosophical, because image is ever connected with thought, feelings and thoughts, but not only feelings. There is no imaginations without thought. So we have also Immanuel Kant in the third critic. Is very clear, because imagination is grounded in the aesthetic ideas. Aesthetic ideas is a concept, very abstract, very universal concept, rooted in sensation, rooted in imagination is rooted in sensation, and ideas is rooted in sensation. So we have the particular and very strongly important topic. So, I want to only remember this, but now we have, I'm sorry, but we have 10 minutes, because only 1 hour is for our panel. So Lydia, I can hear your proposal. And so if you want to start.
Thank you so much, Giancarlo. Can you hear me? Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Giancarlo, for organizing this important panel. Thank you again for the organizers of the conference. It's the last time I will participate actively in the conference before the day of my workshops on August 1st. Let me just say there are still places open. So if you want to join my workshops, you are welcome. What I can say here in 10 minutes, we leave a lot to the imagination, of course, and I don't use slides also to help us imagine what is going on. The name of my talk, which is very short, but still the only one that has a name in this conference, is When Imagination Touches Reality, the Unlikely Alliance, the Magical Kiss. And if you remember that title, even if I don't have enough time to develop all that I wanted to say, you will remember what I thought my main idea is. I know that for Giancarlo Marinelli, imagination in his work in Italy is very important. For me, it has been a new topic, although I deal with humor, and you can say that humor and the creative aspect of the human being is, of course, the working of the imagination to try to break the tragic alliance of the necessary and the impossible. Yes, if the tragic is, as Vladimir Yankelevich, the French philosopher, student of Bergson, said in the 20th century in France, if the tragic is the necessary yet the impossible, of course we'll need to break this somehow. So either by finding it not necessary or either by making it not impossible. So of course I work with imagination and humor in that sense. But when I think about imagination and its role in human life, I first wonder about how imagination was created, what's its role in human life. And I think that imagination came to existence because of the human condition. The very suffering that it involves makes us dream of, imagine of another situation. For example, I read a book once about the idea of salvation. You don't need a supernatural force. The very suffering of human beings on earth might create this idea of a redeemer, of salvation, yes, of liberation of this situation, right? So the imagination role, first of all, may have been to offer us some kind of compensation of the reality in which we are, and on every level. But when this is already said, if this is accepted, we can talk of Michel de Montaigne, who gives a fantastic role to the imagination. When he encounters his own thought, it comes first with many fantasies and monsters, because that very imagination that was maybe created in order to soothe us also brings about fantastic monsters and disasters and irrational fears that we imagine much more than they are in reality, actually. So that would have been a blessing in the first place, begins to have a life of its own. And because it's imagination and it's creative, it creates, according to our own fears and our own circumstances, even more terrific monsters and hells and demons and vampires, and try to put images to our most irrational fears, which makes of imagination a problem for us. The next step in which we have to tame maybe the imagination in order to make it more amenable to reason, to intellect, to harmonize our all faculties. And the taming of imagination is really an art, because you don't want to reduce imagination to the intellect or the reason, because then you lose that space, that liberty in which you play with possibilities. So if for Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, having various possibilities is the key for the unhappy consciousness, because on each possibility you see various others that you could have chosen. I put the red shirt, that means that it's not the yellow, it's not the green, it's not the blue, etc. So I'm miserable. So if for Sartre it's the key for the unhappy imagination, unhappy consciousness, we need to think together how we make of imagination something that helps a good life, an harmonious life, that helps the intellect, instead of just offering possibilities that we can never at the same time implement, and that gives us a false view of consciousness as unhappy. Our goal with Montaigne would be to have a happy consciousness. So how do you do that? Shaftesbury thought that we need, because we cannot know the whole of reality, we need to imagine that reality is harmonious, that reality is a cosmos according to Platonic or Neoplatonic views, in which there is an harmony and good, etc., although we cannot know that. And Immanuel Kant took from Shaftesbury many ideas, but also developed the idea that if imagination is wild, it's become a kind of enthusiasm. For example, religious enthusiasm, or enthusiasm for metaphysics, that it's a terrible mistress, that we continue to love her and have enthusiasm for her, although we know we cannot abide by metaphysics. So this is the idea of calming enthusiasm. Kant idea, believe it or not, it was through Shaftesbury means, through humor. Humor would calm, would tame the enthusiasm, the imagination when it goes too wild. Jules de Gaultier, a French Nietzschean, said, He coined the term Bovarism. He said that every person has an angle between his or her reality and his or her imagination or illusion of what he or she is, as Emma Bovary had this idea of her own importance and what she actually was. And all the tragedy and comedy of life comes from this angle, if it's narrow or big. So think about that, how you actually use humor in order to tame your imagination, also your imaginary vision of yourself, your illusion of yourself or self-importance. Finally, my own philosophy, the Homo Risibilis thesis, tries show that as we all need imagination and we all imagine as most important that we are in order to survive, there is something absolutely ridiculous in the fact that we all do it and all hide it. If we all see it in others and ourselves, this healthy laughter that may unite us in our common condition on earth can make the best of imagination, because the very work of imagination is bettering your life here and not in some imaginary world. So the whole idea, also in creation, artistic, humorous, philosophical, in any metaphysics that you create, it's that imagination meets reality, touches reality, finds its workings in changes in your life, in reality, for the human good, the human condition. And this is an unlikely marriage, an unlikely alliance, because imagination is wild and reality is tamed. And how to make this kiss, this magical kiss happen, either in love, either in work, either in life in general, this is the whole secret of human life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lydia. And now we go to an important topic, because I think to Pepe, José Barrientos, to transform event in meaning, to transform the event also in my existence in meaning, in ideas. This is the power of image. So I want to hear Pepe about this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giancarlo, and thank you, Lydia, because both of you invite me to this session. So you invite me to Lydia. So thank you very much, and it's a great, and thank you to Sergey and the rest of the team for being this possible. I have a presentation, but I am not going to use the presentation, so I am going to make an experiment. But if you want the presentation, I can send you. I would like to talk about a person. Her name is Catherine. It's not the real name. He's a female inmate in a prison in Ibero-America, Latin America. And we meet, I think that 2 years ago, or maybe 3 because of COVID, 2 or 3 years ago. And I remember that she said that she was in prison because she has killed his husband. And I asked her why, and she said, Pepe, my problem was that when I started with my boyfriend in that time, she started to abuse of me. Sorry for not talking about love, but the opposite. He started to abuse of me. But anyway, it wasn't very bad because I don't use to go to the hospital as my friends. And one day we get married, and we have a boy. And one day he decided to kill our boy, our kid, because he was crying a lot. And I took a knife, and I killed my wife, my husband. And this is the reason because I am here. And you can imagine, and I stress imagine, and you can imagine my situation the first day here in the prison. For me, this was a real prison. I cannot wait. I cannot go to when my grandmother passed away. I cannot study at the university. I cannot do a lot of things. So for me, prison in my imagination, prison was like death. So for her, her reality was her imagination, and their imagination tell her that prison was death for her. But anyway, she said, but one day all these things started to change. And I asked her how that it changed. And she said, one day I discovered that the brother of my ex-husband, of my husband, decided to kill my sister because of revenge. After that, he decided to kill my mother because of revenge. And I discovered that maybe prison wasn't a death. Prison was a protection for me. And I started to think in Stoicism, in some people from Stoicism that make some connection with imagination and with opinions and facts. But she said, anyway, it was a protection, but for me, prison wasn't good. Why? Because it wasn't a freedom for me. But now, prison is a freedom for me. And I asked her, how do you did it? Because we are trying to make something with philosophical practice here in this prison, in other prison, and it could be very interesting to know how you could make that transition, that metamorphosis, that choosing inside your life. And she said, one day I started to read some philosophers, I discovered a book of Epictetus, and this is a slide of my text, but I just going to read it. And in that book, the book of Epictetus, the Enchiridion of Epictetus, that is a very interesting book of Epictetus, even though if you are interested in Stoicism and if you are interested in female philosophy, in feminism, I recommend Musonio Rufo, where he defends that female have the right and the power to reflect as men. Anyway, she go to that book, the Enchiridion of Epictetus, and she read the following text. There are things which are within our power, and there are things which are beyond our power. Within our power are opinion, aim, desire, aversion, and in one, whatever affairs are or our own. Beyond our power are body, properly, reputation, office, and in one word, whatever are not properly our own affair. So she said that she discovered that she have to be in prison for 30 years, but she have discovered that she can't go away from prison legally, but she can change, as Epictetus said, her opinions. And her opinions is like her imagination. So she started to think that maybe she can move away, she can fly by some authors from philosophy, from literature, and she started to fly out, and she discovered that in prison, she started to have the possibility to fly to other worlds. Why? Because before prison, she couldn't go to a library, she couldn't go to the university, and now the life was opening from her. And I am going to sorry, I am going to change my screen just for one slide. And this was very interesting for us because it is part of one of the, I suppose that you are watching my slide, one of the session of the project that we are developing in several prisons in South America and in Spain. One of the session is based in Via Crisis, that is the base of that text, and in that session, normally we do this exercise that is part of the idea of this inmate of Catherine. what is the idea of this exercise? That normally we are living with facts, and that facts normally are going to make that we have some passion or emotion. For example, if someone push me, I am going to feel anger or fear, or maybe I am going to feel sadness or concern or compassion, or I am going to feel with the same fact desire to develop my inner strength. But what is the difference? The difference is what Catherine said to me, that it depends on the opinion, the interpretation, or the image that I have in my mind. Because if we go to Husserl, to the phenomenological investigation, researcher investigation, he said that the reality and what we see, what we perceive, in some occasion is the same thing. I suppose that not all philosophers are going to say this thing, but anyway, it's true that the reality, as Lydia, I think that she said, reality is something like a construction. So if this is the situation and our emotion depends on our interpretation or opinions, Stoicism said, if you rule over your interpretation and your imagination, you are going to rule over your passion and emotion. And in addition, you are going to rule over your life. I'm going to finish 1 minute. My friend Catherine discovered that idea, and now this is part of one of the exercises that we are developing in philosophical practice in prisons. And I think that, of course, we can develop it in philosophical practice, and that's it, all that I wanted to say.
Thank you very much for this deep talks, very much. And now we hear Lou Marinov about some historical examples, and I think it's very important imagination about the connection with the inner philosopher. So we have to promote our inner philosopher. So thank you, Lou, and you can start. Lou, and then
we can't listen.
Thank you.
Better with the microphone. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Giancarlo. Thank you to our
Thank you.
panelists. Also, Lydia, you're going to see I agree with you. And Pepe, maybe we're talking about the same thing, but maybe a little bit of different approach. I'm going to show all the slides to you. I have an hypothesis to advance about how is imagination functioning, not only historically in sciences, but also in the arts. So this little presentation will basically show you an hypothesis that I imagined about imagination. And then in the end, of course, you'll already see it ties directly into philosophy, which is the foundation for us of both those kinds of pursuits. And so the common denominator will be this. Okay, so without further ado, let me see. Thanks to the tech support, I can probably share this with you. We'll hope for the best. But I'm telling you, these things, it's not now showing in my own window. So I have to open it first and then come back to you. It's really complicated, isn't it? There we go. Smoke and mirrors. Are you seeing this? Are you seeing this? Please say
yes.
Yes.
Only now.
Okay. So the importance of imagination. And Wikipedia, is always suspect, no matter what they do. Their articles are very suspect, but this is not a bad introduction. Aristotle has a very deep, much better insight, and this is what Giancarlo said at the beginning, that we cannot think without an image. But what I need to do now is distinguish between imagination and image. Here's the received picture of our bicameral brain, and this is pretty well understood by science, that the left brain is the analytical brain, the mathematical brain, the logical brain, and the right brain is the emotional, imaginative, and the artistic and intuitive brain. That is pretty clear, but there's a mistake in this picture, and everybody makes it, and I now want to point out that mistake. And that is a difference between imagination and imaging. And the careless use of language, I think, is going to mislead us if we don't make this correction, because there is a distinction between imagination. To imagine and to image are not the same thing. A video camera images everything and imagines nothing. Human beings image and also imagine. So that's what I want to correct. And in the hypothesis is that imagination is not something that's located in the left hemisphere or the right hemisphere. Rather, imagination arises when both hemispheres resonate in concert. So in other words, whether we're doing science or art or philosophy, we need both hemispheres to function in order for what we imagine to be at its most effective and interesting. And then I'm going to show some examples of how this happens in science. Firstly, we have the very famous example by Galileo. Now, he did not throw cannonballs off the Tower of Pisa. He imagined, and he refuted the Aristotelian conception of gravity, which was that heavier objects fall faster. Galileo proved by a logical argument that that cannot be the case. So he was able to dismiss the old idea that heavier objects fall quicker than light ones. He dismissed this only with his left brain by reductio ad absurdum, but he imaged the correct physics. He did visual thought experiments, and from his experience in life, he knew that in fact objects fall at the same speed on Earth regardless of their weight. And so he was able to come up with the Galilean transforms, which describe motion, and they are in a Newtonian world correct. And Newton, actually, who was born the year Galileo died, Newton's laws are not in contradiction with Galileo's laws of motion. So this was imagining a law of physics using the left brain and the right brain. Same thing in chemistry. We have Kekulé very famously trying to deduce the conformation of the benzene molecule. And the alleged story is he actually envisioned its correct structure when he awoke from a dream. So the deductive left brain couldn't quite work it out, but his right brain, in a state of dreaming, was able to discover the image that he then deduced and analytically drew as correct. Now, I know historians of science are disputing this story now, but it doesn't matter, because even if it's an urban legend, it's so well ensconced that it still serves as an example of how this can work. So in any case, Kekulé utilized both hemispheres to make an important discovery to imagine a molecule. Darwin did the same thing in biology in an even bigger way. He imagined a theory of evolution and a science of genetics at the same time. How did he do this? First, with the right brain, he actually made observations, simply recording data and gathering all kinds of sensory experience on the Galapagos and elsewhere. And then he began to make deductions to analyze his data in order to come up with the hypothesis that useful variations that he observed, whether within and between species, but primarily microevolution, were preserved and transmitted by mechanisms internal to each creature. This was incredible, and he utilized both hemispheres to accomplish this and gave us an incredible breakthrough in biology. So once again, the hypothesis is instantiated. You can't do this with just your left brain or just your right brain. You need both. We similarly have from Tesla, imagining an alternating current, and also in its train, a planetary industry of electricity. But Tesla tells us, we have his own words for this. Of course, he engineered something extremely brilliant using his left brain analysis and mathematics and engineering. But his inspiration came from Goethe's Faust, and he said it in his own words. He was so infatuated with Faust, And wanting to be a Faustian, he had committed huge tracts of it to memory. And while reciting Faust to himself one day, he apparently imagined alternating currents. And those are the words of the inventor. Once again, both hemispheres are involved. Einstein is the paradigmatic case because he did not use mathematics at all to derive general relativity. The first thing he did, as he often did, was to picture how reality worked. So he used his right brain to image things. And he, in fact, chased beams of light in thought experiments using imaging. When he decided that his picture of the world was correct, and that was intuition again from the right brain. When he decided he was picturing the physics correctly, then he went to the left brain and he sought mathematical objects that best described his theory. And only then did he seize upon the Lorentz transforms as the descriptors of special relativity. But obviously, once again, he utilized both hemispheres to accomplish this, not just one. And we could say all the same things and run this hypothesis in the arts. I'm not going to do it in pitiless detail. I've just chosen some of my favorite Russian artists in order to honor our gracious hosts, who we're all imagining we're in St. Petersburg now. So let me just run over this quickly. Pushkin, the great poet. Russians love poets, and so do other cultures. We all love our poets. Poets are clearly mad in a certain sense because they have tremendous insight and creativity from the right brain. But excuse me, my friends, without language and the structures of language, they could never capture that magic in order to transmit it to us as poetry. So I'm hypothesizing that they need both hemispheres. Otherwise, they would be reciting to us chaos, not the beauty and the imagery of poetry, captured in the logic of language. Tolstoy, the same, on the other side of the literary spectrum. His immense novels, his incredible output. This comes from a tremendous amount of imagination, which, as I'm hypothesizing, results from imaging and creating with the right side of the brain. But once again, envisioning much larger structures and linguistic formats in which to capture these creations. And that's a novel. Tchaikovsky, same in music. You have to hear something that nobody heard before, but then you also have to be mindful of the structures of music, which are parallel to the structures of language and mathematics. There's a meter, there's a key signature, there are all kinds of quasi-logical and mathematical things, right? Same with dance and the performing arts. Tretiak, the great goaltender from the Russian team of '72 that played the Canadian team in that great series. Goaltenders need incredible sense of geometry in order to play the angles correctly, in order to be effective, as well as obviously a tremendous presence in anticipating what the other players will do. They're using both sides of their brain, same in dancing. And Kasparov, as one of my favorite chess players and a world champion for many years, obviously, here he's imaging the board with his right brain, but with the left brain, very, very analytically calculating the possibilities from different positions. Nobody could be a world chess champion without both, unless you're a machine. And of course, machines don't need to visualize, they can represent internally. But in any case, humans do both. So how does this connect? Well, the conclusion is that the greatest feats of imagination in sciences and arts alike requires synergy between both hemispheres of the brain. That is the hypothesis instantiated both in science and arts. Since philosophical practice combines both rigorous and creative thinking, in other words, things that the right brain does and things that the left brain does, and moreover, we apply our insights and exercises to extramental reality, namely to the world beyond pure mind, it likewise requires synergy between both hemispheres to arise at its imaginative best. So all of you already know this, but I've just framed it in perhaps a different way for you with pictures to show that we need both hemispheres to function together. And so I encourage you to stimulate your imaginations by engaging both hemispheres to resonate in concert. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
But with Lou, we hear very important So the strong, concrete tools, the strong and concrete tool is present in imagination. Is with the strong and concrete thought is with imagination and is within imagination. So this is very important for us. And now we can hear David Sumiaker because we have to know better the relationship between the body's perceptions and imagination. In this way, we can very take the center of imagination, the right and the left in our brain, so the abstract and the concrete, until the body's perceptions. So I want to hear David about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Giancarlo, and thank you all the panelists, Lydia, Pepe, and Lou. And also I want to thank, obviously, Sergey and the organizers of the event. Well, what I want to mention in this short time, there are some ideas about the imaginations. First, to mention, as Giancarlo remarked, that imagination is a corporal ability, a corporal capacity. The second is to remark the creative and the critical aspect of imagination that is really linked with what Lou have said, but also in the last part, I want to remark how we can use this for philosophical practice that I am sure that Giancarlo also will continue with this topic. So at the starting, I would like to say that imagination is really necessary. An author that I really like is Gaston Bachelard about imagination. He's really good. And imagination is also important, really important for philosophy and for philosophical practice. It's not an etheric capacity, it's also a corporal ability, as Husserl or Merleau-Ponty has shown. For this reason, imply to be really in contact with ourselves. Imaginations imply a closeness with our own bodies. For this reason, when a person is stressed, he can't imagine. And also to do exercises for visualizations. For example, we need that the people are relaxed. In the same way, we have good ideas when we are in symphony with ourselves, with our own bodies. Imagine is a way of to be close, of imagine is a way of touching ourselves, of touching our own system, and generate a trend of process that is open to new possibilities. That is what imagination is in the deep part, in our physiognomy. Then also imagination has a creative trend, but also that works with a critic trend. And this is near with what Lou was saying. The creative is a trend of sense, of acts and processes that we perform. And acts can be more critic or more creative. For example, we could read the Divine Comedy with an open finality, with a creativity goal, with a creative goal. For example, someone that imagine the rivers of boiling blood, or figured expressions of Dante when he arrives to Purgatory. No one will discuss with this person if the expressions of Dante that this person is imagining, they are truth or not. Because there is no this pretension in the acts or processes that the person is performing. But we can have closeness, an approach more critic to the same text. For example, if a philologist analyze the same text, it will be something really different. The care that the philologists take in words is really different than the common reader. For him, it's not important how he figure the characters, the Roman characters in the Purgatory, but for him, it's more important the historical meaning of their inclusion. Is not the central point, the joy that the poetry produces in himself, but the meaning of the verse in trias, the relation with Latin, and the relation with the medieval context or Renaissantist of the epoch is more important for him. Okay, so we have the same text, but we are seeing two different kinds of approach to this text, two different experiences. The analysis of, and the idea is not that one approach is better than the other, simply they have different polarities. But at the same time, if it is a critic aspect won't exist in the reading more poetic, we won't be performing an imagination with Dante's text. So the creative reading is a reading of the text of Dante. We are not perceiving any word. We are perceiving this specific text and also this specific paragraph of the text. So at the same time, the work of philologists is not exclusively critic because he has a lot of some creative aspects in his work, and all the disciplines more hard have them. The processes can have a defined polarization, but also this polarization is not absolute. So we have different approaches, but those approaches have both critic and creative parts. The interesting in this moment is the dimension of openness, the exploratory dimension that imagination has when it appears. For example, Bachelard say that imagination is a specific faculty, and he say that it belongs that function of the unreal, which is physically is as useful as the function of the real. So it's really it's important in his pretension. And also, as I say, the imagination has characteristics that can be really useful to our work. For example, if we think in the metaphoric use of imagination, in the metaphoric use that we could use in philosophical practice, we are starting to give also a critical sense to these imaginations, because we are putting those imaginations in the situation. So we are putting restrictions, some limitations that are the limitation of the context of the person. So in this way, we are starting to add some critic aspects inside the use of imaginations. Also, the hypothesis, when we are using hypotheses, they have a creative trend, but at the same time, they are linked with some group of sentences or ideas. So it's the same when we are thinking in alternatives to solve some problem. We are not just thinking in alternatives isolated. Okay, we have a connection with life, with the world. So in general, the materiality of imagination for the philosophical practice, the materiality, I really like this concept, is really useful for us as philosophical practitioners. Yesterday in the workshop I gave, someone asked me about the meaning of the symbolic in philosophical practice, and I think that is something similar, because the materiality of imagination is linked with who I am. I am a being with history, with a background. The person who is imagining has a background, and to consider all those things put a different condiment in what we are doing. And also, it's important that the person who is imagining do not imagine whatever thing. We imagine certain things. We are focusing in certain things also if we do a philosophical practice, and if we observe that, we are emphasizing this materiality. And I think that is something near to what Giancarlo do in his workshops. And also to finish, the logic inside the process of imagining. The logic that John Dewey spoke, he said that an inference is a jump inside the thoughts. It's a jump from one thought to other thought. And the particular way we connect one thought with the other thought, one imagining with the next one, is speaking about us. So I think that imagining should have a part, a consideration in philosophy and also in philosophical practice, in the personal atmosphere, also in the working places, and to finish in, of course, in philosophical practice.
Thank you very much. So we have here very important things. So the presence, no? I think the presence of concepts and ideas make imagination very deep and very effective. So this is the point. This is the point, and it's very important for philosophical practice, because philosophical practice can to put in the center, inside the imagination, inside the sensation, the presence of concepts, the presence of concepts and ideas in our body's perception. I think this is the very important point. As I seen in every panelist. Okay. We have some time for questions, and I think 10 minutes maybe for question of curiosity for us. In particular, on relationship between philosophical practice and imagination. We have some, okay. So I want to I have
Pepe is raising the hand.
Okay, David.
David or me?
Pepe, you first.
If there isn't any question, I think that, as Giancarlo said, imagination or image, I don't know, is very important for philosophical practice. But after listening to you, and thank you for all your presentation, because I think that they are very different, and I think that this is very important for a panel. But I said, I think that we have to distinguish between imagination to think and imagination to be. Imagination to think maybe is creative thinking. But what is imagination to be? And I think that Giancarlo, you have worked more on imagination to be. It's something like to create a person or to put the person in the construction of himself. If we are not a imagination human being or something like that, we are dead. So imagination is part not of our biological life. Imagination is what we are as human being or as Dasein, as existential things. So I think that creative thinking is good, but for philosophical practice it would be very interesting to think what is imagination for being or for being a human being or something like that. Marino? Lou?
Yeah,
Lou?
just to
Lou?
continue, if I may, to continue that thought, Pepe, because if you consider imagination to think only, this is the academy. This is the pure academic philosophy concerned with thinking about thinking. But if you consider imagination to be, meaning to be in the world, then the sciences are performing experiments to test hypotheses, and the performing arts are engaging with an audience always, and the practitioner is engaging with a client or with a group or with an organization. So this is philosophy in the world, and this is why I'm saying we need a resonance of both hemispheres in order to imagine most fully and constructively. So I'm totally agreeing with you.
David?
I would like to add in the same trend that there is really necessary a big self-knowledge to use imagination the way that Pepe and Lou were speaking, because every person has a way of imagining, and it's not just a technique, because imagining is a way of being in reality, of be ourselves. We are not machines. It's not just to go to a mountain. Okay, it's nice to have a good context, but this is not enough. We need a good atmosphere, a good context, but also to see how we are, which things. For example, if we have a lot of pendants and we are really stressed, first we have to occupy ourselves in our pendant, or maybe using imagination inside that, but to see our reality. Also to use philosophical praxis to trace these lines or directions and to construct ourselves using imagination. At the same time, we project our imagination. I think Lydia.
Okay, Lydia, yes?
Yes. Okay. So thank you for all these comments. And after I talk, it will be nice to hear from you, Giancarlo, a little bit how you do it. But following on Pepe's thought that imagination for living. So let's begin by saying that because we are intentional beings, we all imagine a future, even if it's amorphous. We all first, whether we like it or not, we have this imagination as part of us, so that we are not just dragged in time, but we imagine the future and then we live in it. Okay, we always have this gap between imagination and reality, also the ideal and reality, which is another angle of interest. If I may venture a very interesting thought, I think it's maybe not mine. Were we to deal differently with time, for example, were we all completely happy, we will have no imagination, because the gap, there is no future, there is no time in perfect happiness, because as the Epicurean said, we already have everything. So imagination is here to supplant something missing in reality, something missing in the present that we cannot feel. So we imagine the future to where we move that becomes the present and the future. So these were my comments here. And Giancarlo, I would love to hear what you're doing with your group and how you are using imagination. I know you were just the chairperson, but you are the most involved one with imagination. So please share this with us.
Okay. For me, the imagination is something that is very good to clear philosophical practice, because the thought in philosophical practice is ever connected with experience, ever connected with a sensation. It's a very big difference from academic thoughts, and also from the Occidental tradition about a little bit. But this is very important for philosophical practice, the connection between thoughts, also abstract, the most abstract thoughts, and sensation, and the situations, and the feelings. This is very revolutionary. This is very revolutionary in the world. So in imagination, we have we have a faculty. There is present. It is present in our brain. So Lua said, very, very, very strong. This is for us, for philosophical practitioners. There are a little. There are a very big difference, but this, I think, is very common. The very common point. So this is very the importance for philosophical practice. In my experience, the image is ever something deep. The image is very deep. Image is from sensation, but also in connection with other sensation, and also in connection with ideas. Rilke, the poet, Rilke said, "No, any sensation is the last sensation. Any sensation is the last, because one sensation is in connection with other sensations, and the totality of sensation, and also this is connected with ideas. So in my experience, it's very common, this passage, this connection, and this to make concepts, to make ideas from our situation, also the worst situation, So it is very, very short words, my experience. In the inner journey, my experience, meditation as inner journey, philosophical journey, or also in the dialogue in Socratic polyphony. Every concept is rooted in experience. Every concept is talk from experience. So it's possible to put in the very abstract solutions, very abstract concept, but without lose the rooted in our experience.